So we left off talking about what? What was the last thing you guys read?
I got bombed. I don't remember anything.
We were talking about air raids and stuff still, right?
I remember stealing people up on the street.
Right, they were taking people up off the streets, that kind of thing. So,
Air raids.
air raids were when they would fly over the city.
No, where in
German.
It talks about it a few times, but it talks about the Germans with the air raids over Amsterdam.
No, we're talking about section 7.
A little bit before that. So I'm going to give you guys kind of a quick run through of some other things that happened. Around June of 1943, the people in the annex were told they had to give up their radio. It was too risky to have a large radio, and so they essentially had to turn it in, and they tried to kind of get a small one that they could hide instead. A while later, you remember they had the incident where they thought somebody had broken in?
Yeah.
And what did it actually end up being?
Someone's trying to rob.
Someone's trying to rob, but then they got scared.
Was it like
Yeah.
rats or something?
Yeah, I was talking about before that when like something fell over and thunked and they thought somebody had broken in and all that. Well, the one you guys just read and a little bit later, somebody actually does break in. They don't take anything from their floor. They take something from some other offices. But what is it that concerns them so much about this person breaking in, do you know?
They might find them, like, if they go looking around.
That's part of it. They're worried that somebody will find them, but specifically about the person that broke in, do you know what was scary about it?
Were they a Nazi soldier that?
They were not a Nazi. Well, we don't really know if they were a Nazi soldier, but the lock had not been broken. The lock to the door had not been broken, which means they had a key. They think that whoever broke in had a skeleton key. Do you guys know what a skeleton key is?
It's a key that can unlock any door.
Yeah. So let's say like, it's kind of like, Dr. Corbett has a master key. His one key will open any door on this campus. It's a skeleton key. So whoever broke into the warehouse had used a skeleton key, which suggested that there was somebody they didn't know who was able to get into the building. So we're going to jump pretty far to the end here. The diary ends just all of a sudden on August 4th of 1944. And so what happened is sometime probably a couple of days ahead of time, the Gestapo, remember the secret police, and the security police that were in Amsterdam, they received an anonymous tip. We don't really know where the tip came from. There are kind of theories that maybe one of the people that was helping them gave the tip, like Mieps, who, the girl who was going to get food for them. But they're not really sure. Back in 2018, they actually put out a report saying that they didn't think anybody had actually tipped them off and somehow they just found them, but we really don't know. All we know is that somehow the secret police got word that the two families were living in the secret annex, and they raided it and they arrested all of them. So in August, they took them to a transit camp called Westerbork. And a transit camp was kind of like a halfway camp. It's where they held them until there was somewhere else for them to be sent to,
Mm-hmm.
So they held them there for about a month. In September, they sent them to a camp called Birkenau. So you've got, let's say you have Auschwitz. You guys have heard of Auschwitz before?
Yep.
Okay.
Auschwitz.
Auschwitz is one of the more famous camps. There were 3 of them, though. 3 Auschwitz. You had Auschwitz 1, which had another name, I don't remember what. You had, Auschwitz 2. And then over here you had Auschwitz-Birkenau. So when you hear people talk about Birkenau, they're talking about one of the Auschwitz camps. It was like a satellite camp. So they're all taken to Birkenau. And these were all kind of fenced in one big property. They might be a couple miles apart. And sometimes what they would have you do is they'd have you march from one to the other, lift a bunch of rocks all day and move them around, and then march back. And then the next day, march over, lift the same rocks, move them back, and then march back. And they would make you do that day after day just for no reason. They'd make you sort through garbage, stuff like that. It was just making them work for no reason. So they were moved to Birkenau in September, and in October of 1944. Anne and Margot are separated from the others. And they are taken to a place called Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen, let me write that. It's a lesser known camp. It was actually a POW camp until about 1943. And in 43, they turned it into a concentration camp. So it was only a concentration camp for like a year and a half, something like that. But they were taken to Bergen-Belsen, and originally they were actually meant to be sent to the gas chambers, but they were spared and they were sent away from them instead. And so they were there from October of 44 until March of 1945. And in March 1945, Margot and Anne both contracted a disease known as typhus. Does anybody know what typhus does to the body? Okay, so it's a bacterial infection that actually comes from like lice and fleas and things like that. And typhus, there's kind of different types of it, but essentially it can cause things like a rash that would normally start somewhere on your abdomen and then kind of like spread around your body. It can cause diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, delirium. What is delirium?
Delusion?
Yeah, it's like you're out of it. You're having delusions. You're kind of hallucinating. It could cause like really high fevers, fatigue, all these different things. But if untreated, it can actually cause death. And so for Anne and Margot, that's actually what happened. They contracted typhus in March, and within just a couple days of each other, they both passed away. And so I think Margot was 19,
Margot was first.
and then Anne was 15. That's how old they were. So we only get to see how much of Anne's life.
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years, just about. And really, we don't even see the full 2 years because the diary doesn't cover them going to the camps. The diary stops in 1944 in August. So we're kind of, that's the last thing we really ever hear from her.
When was the last time she was allowed to write?
Well, Margot died from typhus just like Anne did. Their mother, I don't remember how she died, but she died in January of 1945. And her dad was the only family member that survived, and he's actually the reason we have the diary. After he was kind of freed and he was liberated, he went back to the annex and he found it on the floor essentially, because it was raided so suddenly that everything was just left right where it was. And he found the diary and he started reading through it, and he thought, well, I want people to see what it was like, and so he worked to publish it. He actually didn't even try to publish it for money. He just wanted to get it published and get it sent out. But he was the only one that survived. So
What about the Van Dam?
I don't really know. I mean, I don't really see much about the Van Dams. Now, keep in mind too, they kind of used kind of pseudonyms for him. So it wasn't really Peter Van Dam. What was his actual name? Do you remember? It was Peter
I've seen it, but I can't remember.
Van Pels. So Albert Dussel, the dentist, his actual name was Fritz Pfeffer or something like that. So but she used different names in the diary to kind of, yeah. So let's see. The mom ended up in a place called Buchenwald, which was another camp. Oh, hold on, there's it right there. Did the Van Pels survive? Let's see. So according to a list of medical staff from one of the camps, Peter died in May of 1945. I'm trying to see. The mom, Mrs. Van Dam, she died in April of 45. And I don't see anything about the dad.
The dad's just
Herman,
survived.
I think was his name. Okay, he died October of 44. So he died a little bit sooner. But I don't know how they died. It says that the dad died in Auschwitz, so it was most likely something related to a gas chamber or something like that. But yeah, here it is right here. It says he was gassed to death. So it looks like out of like the whole group, Otto Pym, which was Anne's dad, is the only one that survived. And so he went back, he found the diary, he published it, and that's kind of why we know what's going on now.
Did anybody find out about Leah?
I don't know. I'll look into it and I'll see. But yeah, so that's pretty much where the story kind of drops off. And
Why did he go back to the secret annex?
a lot of people did. I think partly he kind of went back to the annex to, maybe get some of their things. They had their plates, they had their sheets, their towels, stuff like that. But also, there's kind of this mentality that you get when something like that happens and you're released all of a sudden, where you think, well, where do I go? And you just go to the last place you remember. The last place the family was together, the last place they were safe, that kind of thing. Because a lot of times they would liberate these camps, and what they would essentially do, like the Russians or the Americans or the British, whoever, they would come in, they would break all the chains off, and they'd be like, all right, you are free. They didn't have nowhere to go. You'd have hundreds, if not thousands, of people who would literally just kind of wander out of this camp and go to whatever towns and villages were nearby. And because some of them, some of them might be a couple cities over from where they lived, but some of them might be 3 countries away. You're not going to walk that far. They're tired, they're starving, things like that. So they kind of just wandered sometimes. But a lot of them would try to go home.
I have a little idea on why I think that he may have went back to the secret annex.
Okay. Why do you think he went back?
Because that was the last place and the last time that they, and forever that they were all together
Mm-hmm.
As you said before, everything that they had just dropped
Mm-hmm.
because it was so sudden. So
Yeah.
maybe he just wanted to come in and give us some stuff to so
Maybe there was some leftover
reminded.
food that he would.
I mean, that could be too.
Or maybe he wanted to go get some stuff a few things that belong to each family member to remind them.
Well, that could be. Go back to kind of get mementos for his his daughters and his wife. That could be. But that was a pretty common thing.